I know what it's like to feel alone, left out, to not have any kids to talk to or sit with, to feel like you don't belong anywhere. No one sees you, no one cares, you're just invisible. And you feel worthless every day, every minute. Being left out hurts, and it can make you really sick and make you want to disappear, get drunk, get high, cut yourself, anything just so you don't have to feel the pain. Kids are struggling, and since we're the adults and leaders of tomorrow, this needs to change today.
Social isolation is by definition a state of complete or near complete lack of contact between an individual and society. It differs from loneliness, which reflects a temporary lack of contact with other humans because isolation is not temporary but is caused over a long period of time. There are some people who believe that literature that portrays social isolation is important because it provides good examples of how isolation in our culture occurs, which it occurs by separating normal individuals who, in the eyes of those who are superior to them, seem inferior from the rest of society for unjust reasons such as gender, race, or sexuality. There are also some people who believe that social isolation is not an issue, seeing no point in writing about it because they believe that it is a natural, positive occurrence since it is separating those who are lesser than everyone else from the more superior members of society. Those same people usually do not even care about the problem because it is not affecting them in a negative way. But if they did have any sort of opinion on the matter, they tend to believe that if a person were truly isolated from the society, it would only be because of the individual, because they believe that isolation is a self-imposed conflict. While I understand why these people might believe that social isolation is unimportant, I feel that it is important to people to understand what social isolation is and what it can do to people, because social isolation affects a person more than just making them lonely. Social isolation can be found in many pieces of literature, such as Her Kind, A Supermarket in California, and I'm Nobody, Who Are You? One paper titled Isolation of Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Youth, a Dimensional Concept Analysis, written by Michael Johnson and Elaine Amelia, aims to present the findings of an analysis of isolation in the context and from the perspective of youths who are a part of the LGBT community. Youths who are a part of the LGBT community are often at a greater risk for negative health outcomes in comparison to heterosexual youth. Isolation is one risk factor cited throughout the literature. However, since the concept is complicated and has many uses, it warrants clarification. Johnson and Amelia then created a dimensional concept analysis to further analyze how the concept of isolation occurs in society. After doing this study, they found results which revealed that there is substantial variability in the concept of isolation. What this study is stating is that there are greater physical and mental health disparities between those youths who are a part of the LGBT community rather than those youths who are heterosexual, and that the reason for this is those youths who are heterosexual are considered normal, while those youths who are considered anything but heterosexual are different and automatically are excluded from the rest of their society. Since they are the ones being isolated and also the ones who are having these negative health outcomes, it is easy to see that there is a correlation with isolation and further mental health problems. In a paper titled Running Opposes the Effects of Social Isolation on Synaptic Plasticity and Transmission in a Rat Model of Depression, written by Gomez and Marta, they perform an analytical research on the effects of social isolation in comparison to depression. Since stress, such as social isolation, is a well-known risk factor for depression, most often in combination with genetic factors which are predisposing. They use a genetic rat model of depression, combining it with a paradigm of social isolation to do their research. While stress causes depression, physical exercise is depicted to make people healthier, happier, and live longer. Compared to group-housed FSL rats, their findings were that social isolation negatively affects synaptic plasticity and increases basal synaptic transmission abilities in hippocampal CA1 pyramidal neurons. These functional synaptic changes coexist with alterations in hippocampal protein expression levels. Social isolation in FSL rats reduces the amount of the glial glutamate transporter, GLT1, and increases the expression of the GLU-A2 AMPA receptor subunit. This analysis further shows that physical exercise in the form of voluntary running prevents in the synaptic effects caused by stress, but do not restore the indigenous mechanisms of depression, which are already present in the FSL rat. In a paper written by Heather M. Gilmartin and Patty Groda called Isolation, a Concept Analysis, they are attempting to distinguish the concept of isolation between the ordinary language usage and scientific usage of the concept. Social contact has been long considered a fundamental need for humans. The term isolation is used through scientific literature and more often than not has a negative connotation. Experiencing isolation can become so severe that it results in serious reductions in adaptation and performance. The findings of this analysis were the attributes, antecedents, and consequences of isolation. The three attributes identified were social isolation, sensory deprivation, and confinement. The antecedents found were individual perception and situational dimensions. The consequences found included loneliness, anger, mood disturbances, depression, anxiety, and adverse health issues. All these findings show that isolation further leads to more mental health problems than just loneliness, though that is one piece of the concept of isolation. My Prison, My Fortress, Franz Kafka's Writing Castle by Antoni Johei examines how Franz, author of My Prison, My Fortress, isolated himself during his writing process, focusing on how this self-imposed process influenced many of his works. This article shows that through the process of isolating himself from his peers, he gained success through his writings. Though this lifestyle of solitude may have influenced his writing in a positive way, that does not make for a very good argument to say that isolation in itself is a positive occurrence. In fact, there are many of his letters which discuss the lifestyle of a solitary author and how this lifestyle negatively impacted his existence. Realizing this, it is obvious that the concept of isolation truly has a negative effect on the human being itself, even if good does come from it in some ways. Though good can come from social isolation in forms which do not have to do with the individual being, but in what he or she may do within the lifestyle of social isolation, as seen in the article My Prison, My Fortress. Social isolation negatively affects the human beings overall. Many authors have written pieces which have themes of isolation, and since writers do not typically write about things unless they are truly passionate about them, then the concept of isolation must be important, not only to the authors, but to their readers as well. It is obvious now that a person who is isolated from his or her peers is not just alone, because with isolation it is more than just loneliness. Social isolation becomes the cause of many other mental health problems, like depression, anger, anxiety, and other mood disturbances. This is why authors need to continue writing about the concept, and researchers need to continue to research and bring more awareness to the concept of social isolation. With more research and more awareness, they can solve a lot of our society's problems straight from the source. questions.
What is your view on the concept of social isolation in literature?
Well, as I said throughout my paper, my view on social isolation is that it needs to be researched more and that it is a very good cause. It is very important for people to know.
How does this topic apply to you in your life?
Well, I remember when I was in middle school and I didn't have very many friends and I did not like sitting by myself. So I think from that experience really made me write this paper. It just gave me a purpose to write this paper, to show that it's important to know about this topic and for more people to do more research so we can solve the problem.